Here you go.
Chris Cuomo here. Welcome to NewsNation. The National Weather Service has now issued a severe warning to Los Angeles to brace for some of the heaviest winds they've seen so far. Again, everything that we've seen in the last week. I know there's fatigue on the story unless you're living it. But the next 72 hours may see the most turbocharging of flames that are still everywhere. The winds could gust up to 70 miles an hour and could easily erase all progress and expose new areas to evacuation and, frankly, catastrophe. So far, more than 40,000 acres have been burned, but I told you last week, the numbers are irrelevant until like a week from now. 40,000 acres, you could look at it in the size of the entire city of Paris. But again, we're nowhere near done. Back with me tonight, CAL FIRE Battalion Chief Brent Pasqua. This is exactly what we didn't want to hear. You guys had a window. You've done amazing work with mitigation. I've been watching it 24/7. Everybody has. Now, what are you hearing, and what can you do about it, if anything?
Well, we still are hearing that these winds are going to be really strong. So nothing's changed. We're still working around the clock to ensure that our fire lines are extra wide. Any hidden heat is detected and put out, and we have extra resources in amongst the communities closest to the fire.
Now, when the winds come, can you fight those kinds of winds in real time any more than you could the last time? Isn't it like trying to help during a hurricane?
It is, but we can definitely foresee and predict when those winds are going to surface a lot better than just showing up and having it blow like a hurricane for 2 days. So again, we've been able to surge resources in those areas that are potentially could have a fire can restart. So again, it's better that we have the chance to do it now than have to react to it later.
So the conditions may be as bad or worse, but you have advance warning now and you have an opportunity to be in place and do things. Fine. Given that, how are you holding up? How are the ranks? Is there anything you need that we can spread the word for?
We're still doing good, Chris. Thank you for asking. We're just out there trying to prepare for these winds. We have crews working in and amongst homes, creating that defensible space. Hopefully they don't even need it, but this is just a contingency plan. And we have a backup plan to that as well. Backup after backup after backup should something happen.
What's your biggest concern?
One of these embers getting to the surface and blowing over our fire line. The thing about that is, though, we have all our resources here. We have over 5,000 firefighters. So that is very concerning that something like that should happen. But I do believe we'll have enough resources here at a moment's notice, and that will be our biggest success.
All right, no reason to speculate. You're going to live it in real time. We'll be watching. And again, as always, we're a call away. Thank you so much for what you have done and what you're about to do.
You're welcome.
Be well, Chief. All right, the first responders, they're doing everything they can to make things better. Here's the problem. They're the only ones, okay? Now, I'm not talking about people who are reaching out in their communities and trying to help in a moment of crisis. In the worst of times, the best of people always come out. And we're seeing that. But we're seeing something else also. The fires are a horrible reality for the families involved and for the whole state of California, but they should also be a wake-up call for all of us, because everything happening there is a metaphor for a national crisis. For example, the absurdly early and irrational blame game that started almost exclusively on social media when the fires were at their worst. Even now, the question, were they preventable, is being asked in the midst of it, and it's always a loaded suggestion that ends up in blaming a political opponent. I saw a lawmaker on cable blaming the other party, and on the bottom of the screen it said, extreme winds returning, Santa Ana changing the game. And you're just going to talk about how the only thing that matters is what party's in power. Why? We know why. We are addicted to blame and have little taste for solutions. It's easier for the media. It's easier for the two parties. And let's be honest, it's easier for all of us to be baited into outrage on social media. Where are the ideas for how to change the infrastructure? No. Proposition 1, everybody keeps talking about it, right? We're all learning California history in a moment. Proposition 1 passed 20 years ago. A lot of delayed water projects. Oh, well, there's your blame. No, they wouldn't have removed the risk of these fires in Southern California. They weren't even connected to the LA water system. So why do we keep hearing about it? Empty blame. Have you noticed that none of the loudest voices have offered any fixes other than to blame their opposition? And we see it repeatedly. And no, not just in California and not just from Trump. We hear it from Trump, but not just Trump. What problem can you think of at a national level that is a debate over potential fixes? The border, the debt, crime, prices, just like the fires and the insurance lapse. And I have some new insight on that for you in a moment. It's all about blame. It's never about solutions. And we know why. Our politics is all about which of the two parties is worse. And we're all playing into it all the time in every instance. And now that's playing out in California. Fires tearing through Southern California. It's not enough to suppress the push for advantage. I was surprised how early it started, but I shouldn't have been. That's what the hype about the water shortage is about, right? You know that, right? You haven't heard any firefighters saying, we don't have any water, the pumps are empty. Well, then why do you hear that all over social media? Empty reservoirs, no water in the pumps. And we all know the facts. It wasn't a water inventory issue, it was a water pressure issue. Oh, it's semantics. No, it isn't. Why? Because the infrastructure of Pacific Palisades, which has a lot of incline, right? And elsewhere was overwhelmed by the fires and the needs. They hadn't anticipated it. Should they have? Legitimate question. But experts, I haven't heard one yet, say anything but no water system in the world could have stopped these wildfires. And yes, one reservoir in Pacific Palisades had been closed a year earlier for maintenance. It was supposed to end next month. No one fighting the fires say they were that reservoir away from bad pressure or for anything. Could it have contributed? Sure. But for that to be labeled as, here's why, it's about nothing but blame and gotchas. Perfect example of the difference between the shite show that I'm describing and reality is when the king of Twitter actually talked to actual firefighters. Watch this.
It was water availability. I understand that was not an issue in Malibu. Is that correct?
There was water. We have several reservoirs that encinos that we use a lot. Now, just an example, if we have one building burning, we could flow 1,000 gallons a minute on that one building with the hose lays that we put in to stop it. You can imagine 1,000 gallons per house. We couldn't do, right?
Correct me if I'm wrong. In Malibu, along the coast, there was no shortage of water. In the Palisades, there was a shortage of water at a certain point. Or is that not accurate?
Well, we were flowing just an amount of water that the system couldn't overbear. We're just overbearing just because of how much water these firefighters were utilizing.
Okay. All right.
Okay, all right. I am an Elon fan. This is not a gotcha, okay? I think he's an incredible force. I really do. But how come he didn't say, stop saying water was the issue? Why not? You notice his tone? Oh, okay, thank you. Oh, well, correct me if I'm wrong. He's nothing like that on Twitter. That's not encouraged on Twitter. Why? I'll tell you why. Because he's standing face to face with somebody. That's why. That's why you're not going to hear him say, well, that's a lie. Trump told me, or I heard. Not with those guys. Not staring you in the face. You're not going to say anything but what he said. Deferential, asking questions, open to being wrong. And he was wrong. And again, I'm not blaming him. All right? He's part of what we're going to need as a solution in our society. Another issue playing out in California that we deal with more and more is the preference for who we care about. For all the yap online about being anti-elite, coverage has been overweighted with celebrities. And we've heard more about pets than the people worst affected. And yeah, I care about pets, and they need help. But you don't think it's a little weird that you know more about horses than you do about the poorest people who've been completely wiped out in places like Altadena? Tonight, you're going to hear from people there. And yeah, they lost the house. But unlike many who've been featured, they have nothing else. There's no second house. There's no money in the bank to rebuild. There's no insurance. And again, it's not just here. Think if it was all celebrities in North Carolina, you think they'd still be freezing their asses off in shelters down there right now? If that train dumped chemicals in Hollywood instead of East Palestine, you think people there would still be afraid to touch their water? And then we get to the heart of the matter. Why did this happen? You can bet that when they start getting into that part of the investigation, it's already happening, but when they get into it in earnest, the theories are going to so coincidentally favor people's politics. Who's an illegal? Who had a red hat on? Who is a whatever agenda they want to promote. And most likely, what's the truth going to be? It's going to be a mix of climate, accidental, inaction, and arson. Land management is blamed, but based on what? Budget cuts are in play. Yeah, but is there really a deficiency of what was needed? Now that takes us into what? The big insurance question. Insurers dropped policies in Southern California this past year because of changes in land management. They knew it was too dangerous. So did the government. Why didn't they do anything? That's not true. They didn't just pull policies because Democrats stopped managing the land. That's a gotcha for Twitter, where there's no interest in a solution. And it's not because they simply shifted money in California to illegals and homeless druggies. Those are real issues. But that doesn't mean that it's the explanation for this. It's a stilted notion. That's why nothing gets better. Because they just get power and they get to keep it by just showing you what would be worse. The real answer is what we want least these days in politics. It's complicated. Whether they were started by power lines, lightning, climate change, accident, arson, combination, we have a situation that has been allowed to get worse instead of making the hard choices to make it better. Here's the villain: the inability to do anything about what doesn't suit the immediate need. Yeah, you can blame the insurers. That's easy. But the problem's way bigger than them. Everyone involved knows it. This situation has been left alone to languish in California and in many other places. We're dealing with the same thing in Florida. We're dealing with the same thing in Tornado Alley. Why? Because we have allowed a risk situation to get managed year by year when they know they can't do that in any cost-effective way. I know it's unsatisfying, but it's true. You can't blame the decision to drop policies in the same year just on greed. These insurance companies aren't treated like health insurance companies, by the way. The state specifically, especially in California, controls how much they can increase rates. Did you know that? Since the late 80s, they've controlled the rate of increase. Why? To keep the rates down. But what happened as a result? Well, the companies wound up taking on risk that they couldn't really afford with the margins they wanted. People were able to build in places that were artificially price supported, so they were less expensive to insure than they should have been, and people built more expensive homes there than they probably would have if they knew the real risk. And some say that this imbalance also helped create a casual perspective on fire prevention from the state on down. That's why a lot of people didn't put the fireproof roofs and all the other things, the mitigation things they could have done. The insurers weren't demanding it. And then what happens? Over time, home values go up. Replacement cost goes up. The company's ability to make money goes down to the point where they'd rather get out of the market. Now, you can debate how much profit is enough. I don't think that debate's going anywhere in America. But again, Florida, the Carolinas, Tornado Alley, you can't do it this way anymore. This is why the insurers are dropping people and spiking prices all over the country. Okay? You can't manage risk like this. We have a model for how to do this. You know where it took place? Housing. 1938, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were created by the federal government. Two different mortgage companies to help liquidity in the system and to deal with a big period of time and risk. That's what has to happen here. Insurers can't do this year over year anymore. It's not going to work. It's going to be too expensive in some places, not available in others. And they know it. And here's how they know it. Way back in the 60s, the state of California started this, what's the program called? The FAIR program, okay? For people to get access to insurance when they can't get it anywhere else. It was never really funded. People don't really know about it. And when all these policies got dropped in Southern California, it's not like the state was right there hand in hand stepping in to put these people in other policies. That certainly wasn't true in the poorest areas. Why? Because we're not about solutions. We're about blame. So they had a stopgap in place. They have the FAIR plan. They have an emergency fund, but it's not really funded. And it's not reinsured. I know it's too complicated, but it's not dealt with in the way that you would in terms of its solvency and its ability if you were really looking at the risk in this situation. Now, do you want to blame Gavin Newsom? Yeah, fine. It's been around since 1968. The last 10 governors, 5 are Republican, 5 are Democrat. Look, all the parties do is go like this. Nobody wants to go like this. Nobody wants to go like this. Because we're not in a solutions business. We don't reward them, right? You're not hearing a lot of people say that the state stepped right in to help. Why? Where's the win in that? So look, it's easy to blame the people in charge in California right now, and there's certainly blame to go around. But I'm just saying that's not going to make it any better, okay? And that's why California is a metaphor of who we care about, of what we care about, and of whether we choose blame over solutions. And remember, we only do this in our politics. You don't do it anywhere else in your life where you would deal with a crisis by just sitting around and saying whose fault it is and not be desperate to find a way to a better place. The debt, prices, Social Security, Medicare, our election system, they're all long-term problems that people go like this about all the time, and they don't make it better. The question is, when will we decide that we will not reward on the basis simply of who is worse anymore? When will we decide that we demand something better, and not just in a campaign slogan, but in the actions of that person or that party? That's what I want to know. Now, let's talk about what needs to be done, what should have been done, what has to be done with someone who's been living it and knows the politics. L.A. Councilwoman Tracy Park represents Pacific Palisades. Now, she says that this has been coming for a long time and people have known it beyond party. It's been a reality. Ms. Park, thank you very much. I'm sorry for what happened to your community. What do you want people to know?
You know, I want folks to know that we are coming together here in the city of Los Angeles, united in the singular purpose of getting this fire out and making this area safe and beginning what is going to be a long process of recovery so that we can rebuild in Los Angeles. And I personally am committed to ensuring that our priorities going forward include investments in our critical infrastructure and our public safety here in LA.
What has to change, Tracy?
Say again?
What has to change? Lost her.
I'm sorry, we were having some technical difficulties and I didn't hear the first part of the question.
What has to change?
What has to change? Well, let me start with public safety here in Los Angeles. We have about the same number of firefighters and fire stations that we had 60 years ago, and yet our calls for service have quadrupled. Here in Los Angeles, our firefighters responded to more than 500,000 calls last year. And yet we haven't added new 911 personnel to handle the call load. We have fire stations that need tens of millions of dollars in deferred maintenance and repairs. We have nearly 100 fire engines and trucks and ambulances sitting in a boneyard with no mechanics to fix them. We have chronically underinvested in our fire department, in our police department, and in a lot of the infrastructure that is necessary to maintain a modern city of 4 million people in light of all of the new demands that we're placing in this community.
So this has been going on for a long time. Where has the urgency been? We've all watched California make choices about what it was going to do about emergent situations.
And that's a good question, Chris. And I think that captures the frustration that so many here in Los Angeles feel. Here in the Pacific Palisades, the community that I represent, we're no strangers to the threats of wildfire. We are no strangers to the need for emergency preparation. We know what it takes to try to protect our communities. And yet, many of the same issues and challenges that we've known about from prior fire instances, for example, that our communication systems tend to fail pretty quickly during wildfires. We know that we have certain bottlenecks and choke points along our evacuation routes. To see those same issues repeat in real time in what has now become the most devastating disaster in all of Los Angeles history is infuriating.
When people say all of that may be true, but it doesn't matter, not with these winds, doesn't matter what was going on, this was going to happen because nature was going to win out.
This fire was the most extreme event that our firefighters have seen. And, you know, I've been on the ground since the day the fire started on Tuesday. I have spoken to firefighters, not just from our own LA Fire Department, but from all over the country who are here fighting fires. Folks who were at Paradise, folks who were at Woolsey, and they have all said they have never seen anything like this. It was a fire NATO that came down through our mountains, through our beautiful Pacific Palisades, all the way to the coastline in what felt like an instant. Regardless of the questions around the infrastructure and the water, the reality here was we couldn't get air assets up because of the wind, an essential tool in fighting this fire. This was something unlike anything we have ever seen before. And the work that our brave and heroic firefighters did under those conditions is nothing short of remarkable. And frankly, it's a miracle that we have not reported more fatalities.
Do you still have confidence in the current leadership?
I'm so sorry, I didn't hear.
Do you still have confidence in the current leadership?
Confidence.
I have seen our state and county and city and the federal government come together rapidly. There has been an infusion of resources from the federal government and the state here on the ground. We are all working together to look at the long-term recovery because it is going to require all layer of government and all hands on deck to make these residents whole and to rebuild Los Angeles.
Tracy, I'll make sure you have my number as we go forward in the months ahead, not the days, not the weeks, but the months ahead. You're going to have needs and you guys are going to be forgotten. Not at NewsNation. You'll have my phone. You make a call whenever you want.
Thank you so much. And I want to make it very clear that when all of the attention is gone and the politicians go back to Sacramento, I'm going to be here on the ground holding people accountable to rebuild and make this right.
Well, you'll have a friend in that pursuit because that's the job and that's why NewsNation's here. We'll be a call away. I promise you that.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much.
God bless and be well. 4 minutes and 5 seconds. Coming up, Pacific Palisades, you know the place. You know a lot of the faces there. You know the who's who. There are places that were hit just as hard where the people are not going to have it as easy when it comes to rebuilding. And they're not getting the attention. Why? Let's talk to them and find out. How about the community of Altadena? Working class, a lot of African Americans, a lot of them generations deep. We have a family who's lived in Altadena for 4 generations. No, multiple generations. And now they have to deal with having lost multiple homes. What is their story? Why haven't you heard it? Next. And got to be honest, most of the coverage that you've been seeing of these fires are in and around Hollywood and in Pacific Palisades. And there's legit reasons for that because of what the fires did. But there's a secondary consideration, which is you got a lot of famous people and a lot of wealthy people there. But they are not the only ones who got hit. And in the land of the screwed, they are going to be, because of relative wealth and influence, in better shape than a lot of other people who got hit by the same fires, like the folks in Altadena, okay? Now, Altadena has got an amazing history that's worth a Google in the next break. The place became a sanctuary for black Americans who fled Jim Crow south during the Great Migration. It became California's first middle-class black community. Now, today, it's a burgeoning place. Latinos, black Americans, white Americans, but black and Latinos in the area are half of the almost 50,000 population. Tight-knit, people have stayed, raised families for generations. The four Williams sisters that you're about to meet were raised in Altadena by their parents, who also fostered other kids, not unusual in the community, and then moved into their own homes as adults right near one another. Now, three of them have lost their homes, burned to the ground. Their parents' home also destroyed, leaving them all homeless and now gathered together once again. So I wanted to bring in the family, got a whole bunch of them. Kimberly, Ellen, Crystal, their cousin Kai Lynn, their mom Matilda joins me now. I have to tell you, Matilda sounds like a funny name, except my mother has the same name. So it's not funny for me.
Not for us either.
So, look, I'm glad I could make you laugh because I'm sure that the humor has not come in any kind of quick way. But let me start with Mom. What is the message that you give the kids and their families when they're facing something like this?
Unity. Stick together. Support each other. And you'll make it through. And I get it, it's the right message, but it all looks so bleak and it's going to take so long. What will sustain, Matilda? Our faith, our unity, definitely, and the love we have for each other. When something goes wrong, we all gather together. And we have support systems, all of our friends that really care a lot about us. They've been stepping up and they continue to step up.
We're showing you home right now, and I'm just so sorry with what you guys have to deal with, but you are lucky that you have the greatest asset, which is family and faith to hold you together. Michelle, let me ask about something else.
Sure.
Are you surprised that stories from your community and the surrounding communities haven't been getting the same amount of attention as other places in California?
Absolutely not. I think that most of what happens, we shine a light on the people that have the wealth or the people that we think have the wealth. But what we absolutely know is the wealth comes with the family and everything that we have behind us. So we're the richest that we can possibly be. But when you ask the questions to the people that shine sometimes the brightest, what you get is what they want you to see. But our stories, the stories of individuals in Altadena and the families, that's what you don't see as much of. But the community is super strong, and we always have been. You're talking about this generational, not only home ownership, but the families that still live in Altadena. We've not ever moved, which is why we're in the situation that we are right now, where we find ourselves all homeless, because it is a community that stays together. But that's not the story that you usually hear.
But it's a story I'm proud to tell. Kimberly, is it true that there are 17 of you sharing a hotel room?
There is. We've been able to keep us all together through this whole thing, from evacuation, where we're like, everybody just meet here and then get together. What are we going to do from here? But we've been all able to stay together. But not just what us. We've got 4 dogs and a parrot. Cats.
The parrot, I don't understand. I'm going to be honest. I understand family. I understand 17 in one room. I understand the dogs. You could even convince me about a cat. but who brought the parrot, and what was that like?
The parrot has been with us for 40 years. The parrot is a part of the family. So we definitely grabbed the parrot when we left.
Yeah, his name is Hank. So we got Hank.
So let me ask you something. Does he bite everybody but your mom?
No,
He bites her too.
me. I'm the one he gets the most.
And he chases.
I do not understand. I do not understand the love of parrots that people have. I've never seen an animal that gets shown love that gives less back than a lot of the parrots that I've been around. But I understand, because that's the legacy of your family, is that you love one another. And no matter what the situation is, and even in this one, you're coming through. Now, Crystal, in some way, you're kind of like, you've got the weirdest situation. Your sisters lost their homes. Your home isn't gone, but you can't live in it, and now it's surrounded. But we call in the disaster business, we call people like you the lucky loser, which is your house is there, but what do you have to go back to? And what do you tell yourself and your family about what has to happen next?
Well, I mean, I think in the same situation. They know if we have to go to my house, that's where we'll be. If we could get there, that's where we would have been. So still the same. We stick together, we're together, and we support each other. And what I have, they have. So.
That gets a big amen from me. So look, one of the reasons that I was excited to come and help these folks at NewsNation start this thing is that part of the mandate is to let us do what I always wanted to do everywhere else, but it's hard. Everybody moves on. Everybody moves on. There's going to be another catastrophe. Trump's getting inaugurated. Who knows what path he's going to put us on out of the box, and on and on and on. But at NewsNation, they allow us to not forget. And I promise you, in the break, I'll make sure that you have my number. The problems you've survived for now. There's a whole new set of problems that are going to come with the recovery. And yes. I see that you have the GoFundMe. We've got the Williams family GoFundMe up right now. And I'm happy to put it up. And I know there are a lot of people who need help. I'm going to give you my number. You let me know how I can help. Like I said to the last guest, Tracy Park, the lawmaker in Palisades Park. It's not days, it's not weeks, it's going to be months. I know that. And we'll be a call away. God bless your family. And I am here. And I wish you all well, all of you, even the parrot.
Well, we thank you for telling the story, right? There's so many people in Altadena that have not been able to do this. So we are really appreciative.
Going forward, I'm here for them as well. You spread the word. They got bigger concerns right now. But Matilda, I promise, there's another Matilda who will make me keep my word. I promise you that.
Good.
All right, God bless. I'll speak to you soon.
Thank
you very much. All right, let's go. Let's go from people to policy. Okay, this is going to be a watershed moment in California, and it's going to reverberate around the country because I'm telling you, you can't assess risk the way we've been doing it anymore. The insurance companies, you can blame them, but it's not that simple. How do I know? Let's look at the law and what's going to happen here. I want to bring in Attorney Todd Becker. He's represented 30,000 fire victims, okay? He's also a resident of Pasadena, so there's a big personal hook for him on this. Todd, thank you very much. I appreciate you joining me, counsel.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate your time, and I really appreciate you shedding a light on our community here in Pasadena, Altadena, because, as you say, a lot of attention has been focused towards the Palisades and really very little towards our community, where we have probably more than 7,000 structures destroyed.
Look, the need is going to be great. And here's my question. It's easy to blame the insurers, okay? I do it all the time. But the idea that they're why people can't get coverage or the coverage has been the way or it's lapsing, do you think it's that simple of an explanation? Or is there a potential class action suit here for people who had policies taken away who blame the state for creating conditions that were almost uninsurable?
Well, okay, first of all, we really have to distinguish between a class action and a mass tort. What we're really looking at is a mass tort case here. And really our case, we filed a lawsuit today against Southern California Gas and Electric. Strike that, Southern California Edison, excuse me. And Southern California Edison is the power company for the area. And we believe that sparks from their lines caused the Altadena fire in Eaton Canyon. I've done cases in Maui. I've done cases in Northern California. And, we feel fairly confident that their wires that were not de-energized and that were not put underground caused the fire that has burned down 7,000 structures and caused the amount of catastrophe in Altadena.
Takes you to the same place, though, right? I mean, they are the contractor, obviously, for the municipalities. It still comes back to how the policies were that were in place that created the conditions for this fire, doesn't it?
To a large degree, but in Northern California, after the campfire in Paradise that burned down the town of Paradise, PG&E put hundreds, if not thousands, of miles of line underground. But Southern California Edison has not done that yet. And that really is the problem here is you can't have these above ground lines in areas that get 100-mile-an-hour winds on occasion because they'll have arcing on the lines and then spark the fire. And then when you have 100-mile-an-hour winds, there's no way to stop the fire at that point. It's going to burn through the community, whether it's, in Maui or whether it's in Northern California or whether it's here in Altadena.
Right. Well, look, the first step is going to be the causation, and it's a little early, obviously, for the investigation. I have heard what you're basing your suit on, and you're going to have to put meat on the bones, and I'm here for it. So as you get proof and start building the case, you have a platform here to make the case.
I appreciate that. I've done a lot of these, but really this one's different because this is my home, It's really, it hits home. It's really my friends, my neighbors, my colleagues. So it's very personal.
Well, look, the story of what makes it so that this never happens again is a very powerful one that's going to reverberate across the country. So we'll be here for it. Mr. Becker, best to the people who are in the struggle right now, and we'll talk again.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
All right, 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Now I'm going to pivot to the insurance side. Hurricanes in Florida, North Carolina, I'm telling you, the same thing with insurance companies dropping policies because of these mass events is happening all over the place, okay? Is it just, because they suck? Is that really all that this is about here? Or is it about something else? I believe it is. We'll discuss why next. More and more, we're seeing what's happening in California, where property, fire, insurance companies are dropping policies. Is it just about greed? We know that in March, State Farm announced it was going to stop renewing home and apartment insurance policies in California, period. And again, we keep seeing this. Other insurance companies, Farmers, Allstate, did the same. Why are they leaving? Because they say it's too expensive to insure. And you say, California, they suck. Florida, North Carolina, across where the tornado belt is, Oklahoma, et cetera. Keep seeing it. Even dealt with it in New York to a different degree. So let's discuss. I want to bring in people on each side of this issue. We got David Jones, former California Insurance Commissioner, now the director at the Center for Law, Energy, and the Environment at UC Berkeley Law, and Rick Dinger, President, Crescenta Valley Insurance. And he was the past president of the Independent Insurance Agents and Brokers of California. So perspective on both sides. Gentlemen, thank you very much. David, I'll start with you. There's a lot of blame going at the state's way that this has been coming a long time. The state has kept down since the late 80s the ability to raise prices to reflect the market. And that made it almost impossible to insure people and has done nothing to offset the increase in risk. What do you say to that?
Not accurate. In fact, the state of California has and continues to grant rate increases that are brought forward by insurance companies based on their experience and based on their assessment with regard to catastrophic risk. What has changed is the underlying risk is rising. And not just in California, but throughout the United States, as you said, some 18 states we're seeing insurance rates go up and insurers beginning to decline to renew or write new insurance. Why? Climate change. Temperatures are rising. They're driving more extreme and severe weather-related events, hurricane, floods, extreme heat, droughts, wildfire, severe convective storms, pick your peril. And insurance companies aren't magicians. These are real losses that aren't only just killing people and injuring people, destroying whole communities, as the images on your screen are showing in graphic detail, but they're causing insurance companies to have to pay more and more money.
Right.
And we're reaching a point in various parts of this country where it's simply uninsurable at any price. And so that, sadly, is the future we're marching into, because we're not doing enough fast enough to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and transition out of greenhouse gas emitting industry. Now, look, you can make changes in regulation and policy. California did that last year, that are going to do a variety of things the insurers asked for. But here's the thing. Doing those things ultimately is going to be outrun by the background risk of climate change. And that's the future that we're facing right now, because we're not doing enough fast enough to get off of fossil fuels and other greenhouse gas emitting industries.
But you can't be sole criterion or single factor analysis on this, David. It's not just climate change. I mean, you have more people living in more places, building bigger houses. And in California and in other states, you do have a foot on the insurance agencies in terms of how they can express rates, right? You've had it since 1988. I'm not saying they can't make presentations and the rates don't go up at all, but I'm saying it's not just let the market decide. And if you knew this in California and in other states too, not just California, why don't you have a supplemental system set up that's better than what you have with FAIR right now? Why isn't it handled like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, where you know the system needs support to have liquidity in it and proper coverage, so you provide for that? Public-private partnership that looks at it over a longer term than just year by year and crisis by crisis. And I'm coming to you, Rick. Don't think you're not part of the conversation. Go ahead.
Well, it's insurers that choose to sign one-year contracts, and the FAIR plan is going to be able to pay claims. Why? Because not only does it have reserves and reinsurance, but it has the ability to assess all member insurance companies to cover claims. But to your point about single factor, sure, we're shoving more people and businesses into harm's way, which we shouldn't be doing. We seem to have no ability at the local level to say no, and the underlying values at risk are going up. But I tell you what, more people and businesses in harm's way and the increased value of homes and businesses wouldn't matter as much if we weren't getting hit over and over again by these extreme and severe weather-related events throughout the United States. Now, you can look at Florida, where rates are 4 times the national average. They've created 2 taxpayer-funded reinsurance facilities. They've limited third-party lawsuits against insurance companies. They have a FAIR plan there called Florida Citizens, which it does not expose the private insurers. If it has a shortfall, it reaches out to all policyholders. They've allowed probabilistic modeling for years. They've allowed reinsurance costs to be included for years. They actually are lowering the standards at which insurance companies can enter the market. And guess what? The national carriers are not writing in Florida. Why? Because they've concluded that even at the highest possible price, even with the least amount of regulation, which Florida has, they can't actually sustainably write insurance there. Now, we're not as bad as Florida yet in California, and other parts of the country aren't as bad as Florida either. But that's the trajectory we're on, because principally climate change, not exclusively, but principally climate change, driving these events over and over again that are killing people, injuring people, destroying homes, destroying property, and making it harder and harder for the insurance companies to insure.
So, Rick, from the perspective of the industry, I know that you guys are getting beaten up on a regular basis because policies were pulled, and that's a bad look. But what is the industry's suggestion about what the answer here is? And first, start with why it isn't just greed, that you guys have a certain rate of return that you want to make, and when you can't make it, you get out of a market.
Sure, and it's good to have Dave Jones on here too, our former insurance commissioner, and he knows, it's been our insurance carriers are publicly or privately or publicly owned, and they've got shareholders that want to see a return. And what's happening is that insurance carriers are going in for rate increases, and they're having to wait 3-4 years and then get denied or get a reduction. They've gotten there recently. They've gotten some increases, but it's just not enough. And these events that are taking place are killing them. And it's there's different places to insure. It should be more expensive to insure yourself up in the hills versus down in the flatlands of Downey or Santa Fe Springs, and allowing the insurance carriers to have free market and have access to be able the rates that they need to charge, I think would solve the problem.
Yeah, but then it would be really expensive and people wouldn't be able to build the same kind of homes and maybe not in the same places, right?
It might be expensive, but guess what? As soon as there's some competition, the prices come down, as we know. And right now we're down to just literally at this point, we have one carrier, California Fair Plan, writing business in California, but we're down to just prior to this event, we were down to 2 carriers that we had in our office when 6-7 years ago, we had 10 carriers we could check out and find the best rates for our clients.
Why isn't the solution what I suggested, like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, where you have a public-private partnership that looks at risk and looks at the needs and requirements over a big block of time instead of year by year?
Chris, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are in federal receivership right now. I mean, I don't think they're the best example of what to do. And here's another problem, right? Mortgage lenders who require you to have insurance actually are very astute, and they can detect when the insurance insuring your home is lesser value. And what a study found in Florida is that lesser rated insurance companies in deregulated Florida, which are allowed into the market, are insuring a lot of homes and a lot of mortgages. And the mortgage lenders don't want to hold on to that risk. And guess who they're selling it to? Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Right. So, I think basically, fundamentally, we've got to do a number of things. One is we've got to get our hands around climate change. 2, we need to invest more in mitigation and resilience. But 3, we need the insurers to account for that in their risk models. Right now, the models that insurers use to decide whether to renew or write your home insurance don't account for home hardening, defensible space, community mitigation, or the $3.6 billion that California is investing in forest treatment. So there's a lot to be done here, but we can focus on the symptoms or focus on the cause. And the thing that's killing us ultimately are these severe weather-related events driven by climate change.
Quickly, because I got to go, which I hate saying, but is true. Rick, do you think it gets any better in the near term in the market?
No, probably not for their 5 to 6 years, unless there's a major change with the regulations and they allow the kind of the free market to take over. Even then, with this last event, it's gonna hit these guys pretty hard. And I don't see anything good happening for the next 2 to 3 years.
All right, Rick, David, thank you both very much. To be continued. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Take a quick break. We'll be right back.